Welcome to She Blaze, where we're bringing you cannabis culture from a woman's point of view. And as always, here to elevate the cannabis industry. I'm one of your hosts, Ice Dawson, Cannabis Socialite.
And I am Dasheeda Dawson, the WeedHead.
On today's episode of She Blaze, a new study released on vape related illnesses, DEA's interim final rule comes for the hemp industry. And we're breaking down all the states voting for adult use cannabis in November.
Okay, we about to get your civic life all the way together, but of course, we've got to kick things off with the high of the week. And I am high on tainted love. This is a new strain for me. It is called, let me just pull it really quickly, Ice. It's called Mochi Lato. And it is, yes, it's a hybrid indica. But one of the things that I normally don't do an indica, but one of the things I really am loving it for is my lower back pain. I've been having a lot of pain from more couch surfing and our time in COVID and being stuck in different places. And I'm like, I'm not loving it. But yes, this is Tainted Love's Mochi Lato. And of course, I got to shout out the Dank Duchess, who was always giving beautiful hash. And, that is always going to be the high of the week for me, too.
Okay. Yeah. Hers is definitely the best. Well, you are smoking good and strong over there. I currently am smoking on some Chief Green Lemonade, his Tiffany strain. Let me show you the packaging because it's so bomb. Okay.
Oh,
yes. And Tiffany got me dancing up in the car, singing along to the songs, getting all my morning routines done. So I'm really enjoying that. And it's super, super dope. And I'm part of the Schmuck Club.
Okay. Well, let's get into these hot topics, though, because we got a lot to talk about today.
Okay, we do. So our first hot topic, a couple seasons ago, so season 2 actually, we discussed the vape related illnesses that were spreading all across the country. Really tried to eliminate some of the propaganda around it because ultimately we knew that it was the unregulated markets that really had the heavier risk. Well, turns out we're actually right, as a new study came out speaking that basically all of the vape related illnesses that we saw across the country had the fewest numbers were in legal cannabis markets. So with all of the madness going around, if you were getting your vapes from a legal state, you did not see any vape related illnesses. And I think it was really important to talk about it because ultimately there were a lot of propaganda. I mean, people stopped using vapes because of it, even though they were getting tested and certified. So I wanted us to follow up and circle around that and be like, shout out to us for, keeping the propaganda down.
Well, yeah, I mean, with cannabis, always gets the bad rap. Doctors are very, very conservative. And essentially, as soon as the vape-related illness started, it became more of a public relations crisis for cannabis, in my opinion, because all everyone talked about was that it was marijuana related. And in truth, we actually had no idea where it was coming from. That was all speculation. But over time, as we started to see the illnesses pop up, we were seeing that a large number of the illnesses were in states that were still prohibited, and therefore, if anything, maybe illegal things on the market. We also saw a correlation with some of the additives that aren't typically allowed in the legal market, and things that people are just doing at home. So, I've always been of the mind, like, I definitely don't think there's anything wrong with the legacy market. But I do feel once we start playing a little bit more science in the lab, chemistry, it's important that we are actually knowing what we're doing. And especially if you're a patient, it's really important. But really, whether you're a patient, you're always a patient. If you're a human being, if you are a mammal, if you have an endocannabinoid system, if you do not want to put things in your body that's going to have an adverse effect. And you also, especially if you're a cannabis advocate, you don't want to do that because you're also potentially putting cannabis as an industry in at harm. A lot of people want to blame cannabis or THC for this illness, and that was how it was starting. But we found out it was more probably related to the additives that we've never gotten tested in terms of what it's actually doing to our lungs and the type of harm. So this is, I'm always happy to see some real studies that prove us right.
I know that's right, especially because it's so important as people advocate to get cannabis legalization in their state and federal. We don't want to eliminate vaping based on really people who are doing it not knowing the science behind how to produce that product. And so, like, make sure you check this reference when you're going and testifying, going and getting your laws passed in that state, because this really could help benefit you to make a case that vape should be allowed.
Absolutely. I still think it needs to be regulated. But I agree with you that, we've got to get over this hump of blaming cannabis for every single thing that goes wrong. And we also have to just make sure that we as cannabis professionals are always holding ourselves to the highest standard, especially when it comes to what is your consumer getting? And I think that is just the really key takeaway here.
Absolutely. And we're talking about extracts, and there are a lot of extracts going around in cannabis right now, particularly in the hemp industry. So let's move to our hot topic number 2. This one is a big one, so it is going to take quite a lot of our conversation before getting into the main topic, but it's really important because honestly, yes, we passed these laws, but there are a lot of other things that go into creating rules and regulations for the laws passed. And the DEA, like, it literally gives us a target on our back. So our hot topic number 2 is really talking about the DEA's new interim rules. So it's insane. Right now, the DA released the interim final rule, basically giving some framework around the Hemp Farm Bill of 2018. And so let's get into this, Dasheeda. You're going to lead the topic because we really have to put our science hats on. The rules is written obviously by people that create laws, but they didn't create science behind it. So I felt like maybe you should lead this hot topic.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you throwing the mic to me. So yeah, the DEA is certainly coming for the hemp industry, as we've said, or it at least is making me pause and be a little bit concerned. So these are some significant risks. This is a bomb being dropped. So we all know in 2018, just to take you a little bit back for the history, the Farm Bill was passed, basically or effectively federally legalizing hemp. And over the last few years, you've seen some more regulatory statements come out from FDA, regulatory statements and coming out from the USDA. And for a while, we've been waiting for where the DEA stands on certain things. And so what the interim final rule, or IFR, is essentially that. It's an interim, but it's also final. This is what I love about government. It's like rigidity, but ambiguous. It's like, how can it be interim and final? But the good news is you get to comment about it, and we are going to encourage everyone to give their comments once we tell you exactly what's happening here. But basically, they issued this interim final rule on the implementation of hemp provisions based on this farm bill. And one of the areas, for the most part, it followed what we know, which is that the flower itself, when you're growing it, cannot have more than 0.3% THC or Delta 9 THC specifically, which is a certain type. It's a certain activated type. And the flower can't have more than 0.3%. We've known that. That's a man-made, government-imposed differentiation between hemp and marijuana. Again, hemp and marijuana are both cannabis and part of the same genus. And part of the way that the government is differentiating, especially at the flower level, is with that THC level. Now, one of the things that happens is There is an extraction and manufacturing process that happens when you go from hemp flower to CBD products that you see on the shelf. Throughout that process, you are extracting and concentrating the cannabinoids within the plant so that you can then redistribute them into your product. Well, there's something along the lines of that process that is a work in progress hemp extract, right? And basically, what this new interim final rule from the DEA is saying is that this work in progress, which is a necessary component of hemp on the way to that final product of CBD, can be deemed illegal. And so folks are like, yo, what? What? Yes. In your lab, as you are going from the flower to the final CBD product, there are stages, and the cannabis derivative or that extract goes through those stages. And sometimes, and we're going to tell you when, but sometimes during those stages, you get above the 0.3%. I mean, again,
wait, I have a question.
It's concentration, right?
So how do they know? Like, can you even sometimes tell when it goes above? Like, do you have to have a meter? Because sometimes you don't know if it's at. So there's no way.
It depends on how your lab's set up. That's what I'll say. So it depends on how your lab is set up based on what you are able to ascertain is the concentration. But for most people that I know, they're not paying that much attention to the work in progress. Why? Because it never leaves the lab. It's not being sold. And in previous years, it hasn't really been tested or talked about by the DEA. So now the DEA is specifically calling it out and saying, yes, if that even goes over 0.3%, that is a Schedule 1. That is a federally illegal substance that you now have on your premises, which, by the way, a lot of hemp manufacturing facilities are also good manufacturing facilities. They're also FDA certified facilities. There's a lot of different certifications that you can get when you're manufacturing. I worked in Victoria's Secret, right? And we did things with the beauty business, plant extraction, a lot of the same processes. These are a lot of the same manufacturers. So what do you think is going to happen when they find out that they're at risk throughout the process that they may have in their possession something that's a federally illegal Schedule 1 substance now? And in some cases, you can't help it. So even if you are measuring it and you're like, yes, I'm going to make sure I add all of this extra equipment, I add all this extra cost so that I can measure on every single step and make sure that it's under 0.3%. If your end product is meant to be a CBD only product, guess what you are primarily extracting out and therefore concentrating in a substance somewhere that's meant to go in the garbage, but it's still in your lab. You're extracting out all the THC. So even if it started with 0.3%, once you extract it, that concentration, now you have a product. If there's only 100% CBD on one end, then the other end is 100% THC because you extracted it all out. So that byproduct, if you will, before you've even gotten to the manufactured good, is now, based on these interim rules, an illegal substance. That's coming for the cannabis industry, in my opinion. That's coming for the hemp industry, in my opinion.
GTFOH, what is going on? Like, who is making these things? Whose idea was it to be like, let's pretend like we don't know how science works and create rules and regulations?
Well, here's what I realized, and I've talked to a lot of people in government, out of government. People pretend they don't know how science works only when it comes to cannabis, right? So this is a no-brainer if we're talking about plant extraction for a company like a Victoria's Secret in beauty. It is because we're talking about cannabis, and DEA wants to support what I feel like are FDA clear moves to corner the market in the way they want it. So just to refresh everybody's mind, this isn't just for, the people who are worried about manufacturing. We've got to be worried about DEA and FDA rules all the time. So that's why we bring them to you, because we want you to know when's the right time for you to actually go ahead, give your comment, go ahead and testify, because at the end of the day, there's no way, if you don't have it on record, that they're going to ever be able to be held accountable. So we could say, even if they do what we don't want them to do, we could say, we told you, and it's on the record, and here's how. So we definitely encourage, you can make comment on this, I believe, until October, or is this one the August 31st?
No, this is October.
Okay.
Because they just released this. So this is October.
Okay. So we will definitely drop that link. We want people to make comment about this because it's ridiculous. It is exactly like, we said here with Giselle, a comment about they're going after small businesses and businesses of color. I totally agree with you on that comment, because at the end of the day, it is those businesses that are going to have to spend extra money to get the equipment necessary or go through the process necessary to ensure that they always have less than 0.3%. But to some degree, there's a point where there is no way around it. If you want to make CBD only, 100% CBD only products, and you're starting with the hemp plant that has some THC in it, you are going to be extracting out, for garbage, of course, but you're going to be still extracting out a substance that is a lot of THC. And that substance is, based on this interim rule, deemed illegal. And so what I worry about is a lot of bigger manufacturing facilities probably will get rid of it, and they'll, nobody's going to use it, but it's the smaller manufacturers, it's the ones of color that I feel will get reported. And then that's when the DEA feels they can come in, they raid the whole thing. There's no respect for, this section had everything right. There's no respect. We have enough history with the way we were treated with flowers and the legalization of medical marijuana. This is that same type of situation, in my opinion.
Right. And it also bankrupts the industry before it even gets started. Honestly, you're putting all this money into manufacturing. A lot of people have started hemp manufacturing companies, and now they're seeing this. Also, how easy is it to get this equipment? It's not easy at all. It is not something people can do quickly. So it's like it stalls your business that you just started. You just put your license on. It's putting you further and further behind the start line. And so I think it's definitely a struggle for people of color. And honestly, it also leads into our second part of the rule, because these were a lot of pages. It's really long, but I will empower people to go and read it. Try to, even if you got to Google some of this stuff, do it, because it's worth it to understand what they're doing. Because I know a lot of people getting into the hemp industry just via topicals.
Yeah.
So sometimes it doesn't come isolated, and you have to remove that part. And so the second part is really also talking about THC too, but it's talking about it a little bit from a synthetic point of view. So can you just break down what synthetic really is, and why do they consider the Delta 8 a synthetic THC?
Well, first of all, I have to challenge almost anything that our federal government says that is scientific based around cannabinoids.
Air quotes.
I also have to remind everyone that, I try my best not to go down the rabbit hole, but I am a trained molecular biologist, and these are molecules we're talking about. So I do geek out at some time. So definitely time out me if I OD. Yeah. But no, real talk. What I struggle with is the fact that THC is being demonized. So a couple of reminders. First, we possess an endocannabinoid, one we make ourselves. It's called anandamide, that on a naked eye, under a microscope, even for a molecular biologist, however you're looking at those molecules, it's hard to tell the difference between the two of them. The other thing that I will say is cannabinoids are molecules that really differ by just one or two elements. So folks that, I don't know if you're taking you back to high school, your periodic tables, that carbon, that hydrogen, that oxygen, those are the different elements, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when you look at the CBGs, the CBNs, the CBCs, these are other cannabinoids, THC, CBD, there's a very, again, unless you're a molecular biologist or a chemist, you're looking at these molecules drawn out, and it's like very, very subtle differences. But don't get me wrong, even a subtle difference can be very, very drastic. Let's look at hydrogen peroxide, which is 2 hydrogens and 2 oxygens, versus water, which is 2 hydrogens and I believe 1 oxygen, right? So we don't want to drink hydrogen peroxide. So even that one subtle difference means it can act differently. So I want to just say that from a scientific foundation, that's what the differential is, very subtle. In this case, we previously were talking about delta 9 THC, which is all about really where a certain where there's a certain I guess bond on a certain one of those carbons, but now we're talking about delta 8 THC. But because they're so close and they look so much alike, through just a couple of chemical reactions, some that actually happen internally, but many that you can do synthetically in the lab, you can turn CBG or CBN or CBC into a delta 8 THC. So you can turn one of the what they call inoculant or non-intoxicating cannabinoids. All of them are psychoactive. So just again, scientific foundation, all are psychoactive. But those non-intoxicating ones that I guess the DEA is not so afraid of and doesn't care about, you can actually synthetically in the lab transform them through a series of reactions, and that's heat added and all of that reactions and make them into a THC.
Okay.
The second bomb and the second way that the DEA is coming for the hemp industry is that for a long time, because hemp, like marijuana, has all of these, it doesn't just have CBD and THC, it has CBG, it has CBN, it has CBC. So those are the new, what I call sexy cannabinoids that are coming into the market. And hemp players are actually taking advantage of that. They're starting to extract those things. They are also starting to play around with creating delta 8 THC because they are starting, as long as they're starting with the legal plant, there was no rules around delta 8. And guess what? Now the DEA has decided they're going to make some interim rules around this delta 8 THC. And essentially what they're saying is they've outlawed it in some ways. They've basically indicated that delta 8 is going to be a synthetically derived THC, and therefore it remains an illegal Schedule 1 controlled substance. And so that basically means D8, right? Again, created by a chemical reaction, such as converting a CBD to D8 through a use of various catalysts, right? It's going to likely be deemed by the DEA an illegal synthetic THC. And sometimes, again, you might not even know you have it. It depends on, again, how focused you are on it. But this is actually a point of revenue stream for some really smart, scientific-based hemp companies. And DEA is basically stomping it out. It's like, nah, that's the federal illegal drug as well.
That's so crazy because it's like here in this part one, basically, they have no science related behind their ruling on the work in progress hemp. But on the second one, now they know how to do science and they understand synthetic made THC versus not. Come on now. Come on. Who are you playing with?
It's exactly what the commenter Giselle said earlier. It's a block, right? And they're playing chess. And we still somewhat, I feel like sometimes when I meet certain people in the cannabis industry, they're so kumbaya, they're playing hopscotch. They're not even
Connect Four.
They're not even on a board, right? Like they out there skipping like it's all kumbaya. No, we need to be strategic. And the things that we're saying definitely put targets on our back. But it's important for me, definitely as a city official, to be as clear as possible that our policies really absolutely need to be grounded in real science, not fear-based rules, not bro science, real science, and also not grounded in what's going to make the big pharmaceutical companies the most money. So this is an area that I feel like, quiet as it's kept, the FDA is probably in bed with pharmaceutical companies like a GW Pharma that have already started some sort of research development on some of these things. And they want to corner that. It's important for you to understand that even though these are interim rules, they are ones that they're setting a precedent. And every time precedent is set, that is what we are up against when we don't, fight it happening. So you do want to go and you want to make sure you make comment. But I also want to say that gives us another opportunity to shout out the fact that we have the FDA who has put out these clinical research rules, expectations around CBD, and you have until Monday to make comment on that. We've talked about it a couple times in previous episodes, but they're going through through the pomp and circumstance protocol, whatever it is, so that they can get the comment. But honestly, they already have their game plan in mind. I'll give this last thing because I get real hoity-toity when it comes to how the government treats us sometimes. But the FDA has done exactly this in the last 2 years since legalizing hemp. It has approved its only FDA-approved CBD drug, Epidiolex, which is made by GW Pharma, which is actually not even a pharmaceutical company based in the U.S. Okay, that's one. In doing so, the day that it got approved, that pharmaceutical company raised $300 million just on the sales of the would-be drug in the United States. That was in 2018, to the beginning of 2019. Right. Shortly after that, the FDA said, you know what? Because CBD is actually now a drug and has been in federally approved trials, guess what? It cannot go in any food. It is now something that can't go in any food and can't go in any dietary supplements. So believe it or not, if you got CBD gummies or you got a CBD capsule or you got your CBD drink, all of that falls under that. And technically, the FDA, if they so inclined, could absolutely come and decide that you got to take those off the shelves. And they did that with a couple of companies. See how it is technically, and then they choose who they're going to harass. And I think the choice is strategic. When you go after Charlotte's Web, which is our largest, what I feel like, homegrown hemp-based cannabis company, that means you're trying to take out your largest competitor for a GW Pharma, right? In fact, they're the reason that GW Pharma even wanted to make that CBD drug. So that's what type of chess moves have happened. That happened in 2019. Shortly after, the DEA removed Epidiolex from the schedule altogether. So we can get Epidiolex in Whole Foods if we wanted to. It doesn't require a prescription. It doesn't require it going through a pharmacist. It is not scheduled at all. So what does that mean? That means that they have an HOV lane to just making money however they want. And we have to continue within the industry jumping through the hoops and worrying about the fact that these type of interim rules can come down. And when you think you're doing everything right, you finally got your business going and flowing. Now the DEA can come in and disrupt with these new rules that are all based on what? I feel like setting up the one FDA approved drug. This has been a series of moves that have happened since 2018 for which we have been tracking. And I just think it's important for us to all wake up, and see what's actually happening and push back against it, because all it is a setup for now the plant, which we really should be able to grow on our own without anybody in our business, it being this new pharmaceutical cash crop, if you will, in the same way opioids were in the 80s and the 90s.
Right. And it's really it's making it hard to compete. It is really, it's like they don't want anyone to make money from it. It's already a bias rule implemented, bias rules and regulations. And I wonder how many people that helped put this together has a little stock in the GW Pharma.
When they're offshore companies, that's exactly what happens. That's what we have to call out. So you're saying it, and I know we probably watch too much Homeland, or you feel like you got too much 24, and you're growing up and they got conspiracy theories. No. The government is 81% white male, or at least it was. It actually has gotten a little bit smaller, but most of those white males are lawyers, and they're actually almost all of them millionaires too.
And if you work for the government, people that work for the government know y'all not getting paid that much. And it ain't old family money either. But, before we start down that rabbit hole, because we go there all day, how about you check some of the comments that we've had, and let's start moving on to the main topic, because this is really, really important.
Yes.
So our main topic is all about states voting on the ballot in 2020, in November 2020. And this is going to be for adult use. And there's still, with all this crazy COVID madness, no one really being able to get out their house, they still made the ballot. So kudos to these states for making the ballot. Of course, things are not perfect, but if you're moving forward, you're moving forward.
Agreed.
So our first state is one of your little hometown states, New Jersey. New Jersey did make the ballot for this November election 2020.
Yay! So like a light golf clap, but we knew that. We've known for a while. I don't even know where to begin, but like, just let's let the people know exactly what's being voted on.
Word. So it is being voted on to allow adult use cannabis for 21 and up. And it would allow for cultivation, processing, sale of retail. This will also be a constitutional amendment that would take place on January 1. And currently, with their Cannabis Regulatory Commission that oversees medical marijuana, they will oversee the adult use cannabis as well. They have their sales state tax at around 6%, with a prohibited additional state taxes. However, they will allow up to additional 2% tax on a local level. So this is some of the lowest taxes we're actually seeing across the country. They also will not have the ballot determine the different measures of possession limits, home grow rules, and retail regulations. They would prefer the legislator and the commission to implement those laws and regulations. And I think that's actually pretty smart. So basically, they're just asking you, do you want it to be legal? 21 and up, yes or no? Like, and you're hoping that whoever their commission is, and you're hoping whoever you're voting in as your legislative level will actually create a framework that benefits the market.
Yes, and that means it really is important who's the commission, right? Who is regulating? Because ultimately, that is where the rubber meets the road. We have seen so many other places where there is a ballot measure that people vote on, but then it gets implemented cray-cray, or in some ways not quite exactly how it was intended when the public voted on it. And so you want to marry the people who are going to be in charge of creating the regulation with the overall goals or best benefit for the community at large or the cities. And what, that includes access as well as price point, the taxes, and the revenue as well, right? But one thing I want to just remind folks is just because it legalizes in 2020, which I feel very well may, based on just, again, preliminaries, us understanding exactly how we got there. New Jersey had an opportunity when the governor came in. I think he started in 2018, Governor Murphy. He was clear on his platform for election that he was going to legalize. He just could not get it done among his other lawmakers. And so the ballot referendum was something that is like almost like, listen, we tried 2 sessions and y'all wasn't really trying to agree. So now we got to take it to the people. When things get done within the sessions, they try to work out the details of things. So for example, some of the things that we couldn't agree on, which I'm a little bit concerned of, that will say yes, but we don't know what's going to happen, is they couldn't agree with what was going to happen with the cannabis tax revenue, right? How is it going to be reallocated back into the communities that have been targeted from cannabis prohibition? I mean, New Jersey was still arresting hella folks up until 2019. Just last year, it maybe started taking that real dip off. It actually pains me to hear the governors of New York and New Jersey talk about cannabis legalization, and for us to see now this videos of people getting taken down, dragged down for a smell. I have to shout out Niambi Tosh, who was Peter Tosh's daughter. Her brother was basically assaulted in prison because he was arrested for cannabis possession and put into a coma. And then more recently, he just passed. That happened in New Jersey. And so, and that happened in New Jersey recently, as recent as the governor, trying to say, hey, we need to legalize this. Right. It happened in New Jersey while there was a medical marijuana program. So I am very, very always a little bit concerned when we just ask the blanket question to the public, because then it's almost like people are engaged for the purpose of the vote, but then they disengage and expect that our politicians or our lawmakers are going to do what we expect them to do. And when things happen behind closed doors or not enough knowledge, we get surprised by the fact that Black folks, especially Black and brown folks, Black and brown folks, we were not necessarily taken into account. And so I hope that's different. We need to do real reinvestment, restitution. We need to restore these communities. That's what the cannabis tax revenue is for. But on the other side, we need to make sure that the legacy market has a room. This needs to be a market that people can play in. It needs to be one that is very, very layered, from small craft to really big. And it is not just multi-state operators coming in and trying to own the market.
Right. Or buying whoever is controlling the framework of the market either. You know, they got to be able to have some sense. So it is kind of nerve-wracking because you are putting truth and honesty in people. And sometimes we don't get that across this country. However, the question is, do you approve amending the Constitution to legalize the controlled form of marijuana called cannabis? So good luck with that question.
And who wrote that?
Well, clearly not the people that wrote the DA final rule.
Okay.
So yes, now let's move to Arizona. Now we have been, I feel like we've been all over the country trying to legalize this damn plant, but we actually have been representatives in Arizona trying to do it too. Back when we were newbies in the industries, now we old heads, but newbies in the industry, that was one of our first like lobbying experiences, really getting into law, you coming straight out of just corporate America, and we were bushy-eyed and bright-eyed, and that did not pass.
It didn't last.
It didn't pass. It didn't last. And so we are now seeing this 4 years later coming back with a little bit of a difference, but not much. So Prop 207, which will legalize the possession of marijuana for adults 21 years or older. In Arizona, individuals would be permitted to grow no more than 6 marijuana plants in their residence, as long as they are enclosed and lockable and beyond public view, honey. Also, yes, the ballot will have the initiative ran through the Arizona Department of Health Services, and they will be the ones creating the framework for the cannabis, which will be retail stores, cultivations, facilities, and production facilities. It will also be required to accept the license applications from existing non-medical marijuana dispensaries, which are eligible to hold nonprofit and for-profit adult use license.
That's what's up.
Yes. It also claims that they will have a social equity ownership program, which will issue licenses to entities of owners from communities disproportionately impacted by the enforcement of previous marijuana laws. And, we got to talk about the money, honey. They are asking for a 16% tax on marijuana sales, in addition to the existing transaction privilege tax and use tax. They claim that the revenue of the tax will be divided among community colleges, districts, municipal, police and sheriff, fire departments, and a new justice reinvestment fund.
Well, that was a lot. And thank you so much, as always, for cluing us in. One thing, okay, first of all, you're right. We started off in the cannabis industry in Arizona, and we've seen what a failed ballot attempt has looked like, right? Because we participated in trying to get the previous one. There's some good things and there's some bad things here. And there are a lot of people who are not necessarily like real true cannabis advocates in Arizona, not really happy with the ballot. And one thing you'll notice, as we were talking about New Jersey's was one question that was just like, oh, I don't, do you want it legal or not? Like that was New Jersey. And they're like, we're going to wait till after to figure out all the rules. This one is a lot of detail and a lot of information. And so when people are saying the vote itself, it says yes on the ballot, right? Proposition 207. But in order for you in Arizona to say, okay, feeling comfortable saying yes to that proposition, you got to know that it's going to do all of these different things. And if you're a person that doesn't agree with even one of those things, are you going to vote yes or are you going to vote no? odds are you may vote no. Or if you're a person who doesn't even understand some of those things, or hasn't had it fully explained, you may vote no. So what happens is Arizona in this format often, I feel like, gets tripped up because people aren't necessarily really understanding what's happening, right? And when they don't understand, especially in a state that is largely a older state, right? There's a larger, really 55 and older population. It becomes asking them a question that it really, really takes too much information for them to feel comfortable really just saying yes. Whereas New Jersey, they clearly just trying to get it passed as quickly as possible. So they're asking the most broad statement, which is, do you want it legal or not? And the only thing we can tell you is 21 and over. That's it. It's a big difference. So I just want people to point out like how different it is, and also that these differences are some of the potential thoughts that we may have about federal legalization, because federal legalization could be as deeply detailed as that, like the MORE Act, and therefore having to go through Congress and all these different levels. Or it could be a question on a ballot that goes with when we vote for the president too. You know what I mean? But we've never seen that, either one. We've only seen it introduced in Congress, and it gets deaded by the Republican Senate every time we try. So there's a part of me that feels like if we really just about legalizing, no matter what, there's a simpler way to do it. But I still, like I said with New Jersey, I worry about what is in the aftermath. And in this case, at least I can say if it passes. Now, it might not pass because it's too complicated, but if it passes, there are at least some things that I can get with,
Right. It's definitely one of the more complicated questions on the ballot. It feels like they put a lot of time and effort into, come into what they consider a happy medium of things. But I'm not going to lie, that 16% sales tax, woo, honey.
Plus all the other taxes too, because they didn't even put that out there. Arizona has taxes that are related to basically is sin tax, right? SIN, right? You're sinning and you're doing something that's bad for your body. They have it for sugars and other things too that I actually agree with, but this is not one of them. If you have a robust medical marijuana program, right? Perhaps we're not sinning. Perhaps I just don't want to pay $300 for a 2-year card, and I just want to be able to go pick up what I need. We've got to change the mentality. This sin tax, is not the same as alcohol. Every time you use cannabis, it is medicine first and always. It is the same as if you're going to get a prescription for 800 milligram ibuprofen, or you got to go pick up the Advil, which is a branded. It's bad enough I pay an upcharge because I'm paying for a brand. Why do I have to pay for the sin of wanting to deal with my ailments without becoming formally enrolled in your medical marijuana program? Now, Arizona has over 200,000 medical marijuana patients, so not a small program. It's not a sin tax. So that's where I struggle with that.
Yes, it's not a sin tax, and it is fairly easy to get your card. It's fairly easy to become a part of the medical marijuana program. And so, it does sound like they're getting first dibs, the medical marijuana businesses that are already up and running and have all these things. They're getting first dibs on a license too. So this is something that you guys are not automatically should think yes or no on. You definitely got to bring all the facts to the tables. And that sin tax, I can imagine paying 16%, especially when the taxes are not high to be a medical marijuana patient or buy the products.
No, and that makes sense for what we've actually expected in Arizona. Medically, the program is a pretty good one as compared to other medical programs. But I think this idea that you're sinning and therefore we're going to tax you more in the adult use, it is a little bit odd. I would rather that be, this is the tax because you decided not to be in our medical marijuana program, right? Like we trying to get that $300 back, but it's getting done through this way. But it's still not the highest. We lived in Nevada. We know that it could be 25% easy. There are a lot of other places that are charging more, but that also means that we need to highlight how important it is that New Jersey did outline what the tax would be, and it was 6 Now, that is probably the only thing in New Jersey tax-wise that is cheap, because if you've ever bought a house in New Jersey and had to pay taxes on those houses, like New Jersey is pretty bad. But other places like Illinois, 37% basically effective tax going out the door to the consumer by the time you tack on all the local stuff too.
Right. They like, oh, by the way, pay half or more for your cannabis.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of higher taxes, let's take it down to Oklahoma, which we know one of our, we have see, I told you we've been everywhere. Oklahoma was one of the first cities that we got to do our cannabis education advocacy symposium and expo sees. And we introduced medical marijuana really to that market and that community and gave them the ability to vote and have medical marijuana. And now look at them. A lot of people are using cannabis. It's quick. It's easy. It is I think it's going to be one of the biggest medical marijuana markets in the country, currently looking with the markets that we do have. However, they have their ballot for cannabis adult use, and now their ballot is State Question 813, which the Marijuana Legalization Initiative may appear on the ballot, as it will legalize and regulate marijuana for persons 18 years or older and impose a 25% excise tax on marijuana sales.
Yeah, so this is, I'm going to correct you, it's an excise tax, just so you know. And it is, yes, 25% is large. But I think part of it is because they know it's going to be largely tourist based. They currently have 10% of the state enrolled in their medical marijuana program, not 10% of the sick people or the people that, physicians are already seeing for ailments. 10% of the whole state have enrolled. Why? Because it's cheap to enroll. It's not the same like 300. It don't require a specific ailment list like New Jersey has or New York has. It's really the discretion of your physician as you guys decide how you want to take care of yourself. It is alternative. It is alternative to opioids. And anybody also can get a license to sell in the market. So they have over 2,000 dispensaries. So it's not like there's any dry spots. Effectively, we will watch just their medical program. I'm saying this for the record because I like to do prediction, but their medical program is going to be the reason that we find that their legacy market starts that transition. This is the only state that I can see that if you're in the legacy market, you got no reason to hand over the little money that it takes to get a license and start selling. This is Oklahoma, Reggie. Okay, this is Oklahoma. So we definitely want to make sure, again, in my book, How to Succeed in the Cannabis Industry, I call out Oklahoma and Oregon. Now I'm in Oregon, so I'm definitely following my own tea leaves that I've made in prediction. But Oklahoma, when we were there, I said it multiple times, for hemp related stuff, that was an easy market to get into. But now the way they've set up their medical marijuana program, super easy. The adult use program, I feel, is they're setting it up correctly, where it's like, this is if you're not from this state, you're rolling through and you want to participate. Yes, you're going to pay that tax. That's the same as if you go to Nevada and you want to gamble or you want to participate in what Nevada has. Shit, be honest, you're going to just buy clothes in Las Vegas, you paying a ridiculous amount. It's in the upcharge on the price point. So there is a bunch of opportunity here for them to drive tourist dollars to the state of Oklahoma. In fact, I'm like, who's trying to go to Oklahoma with me once this passes? Let's have a little party out there.
We can maybe, on a ranch or Tiger King or whatever. No, thanks, honey. I'm just a little bit more. That's like hometown country versus like Oregon. You get like mountains and shit. So it's like a whole different. It's a whole different thing. But let's move on to Montana, because this one will round out the states that are going to have some stuff on the ballot for adult use cannabis. And yes, I did say Montana, which is one of the only things we didn't really jump into, but we don't know too many brown people in Montana. I'm going to be honest about that. So Montana is a constitutional amendment proposed by the initiative petition. Under Montana's constitution, a person 18 years of age or older is an adult, except that the legislator or the people by the initiative may establish the legal age of purchasing, consuming, possessing alcohol beverages. But the amendment also challenges for people to allow purchasing, consuming, and processing of marijuana. So they're changing alcohol and marijuana at the same time to 18 years or older.
Wow. Well, first of all, let's talk about the 18 and over. I just had a little debate with someone because they wanted to make their gate to be that even though we know the legal age is 21, science says 25. I'm like, where does science say that? In some biased research prior? But yeah, I don't like grouping alcohol and marijuana together, but that doesn't surprise me given this is Montana. To me, this feels like them seeing an opportunity to bring in tax revenue and not as concerned about the health and wellness benefits of it. I'm happy in some ways that it's 18 and over, because we know that in places that have been legalized for 21 and over, even when there is a medical program, that 18 to 21-year-old age group, especially among Black and brown males, are over policed. In Colorado, you saw a huge spike in percentages of arrests that are coming in just that age, because legally they're not allowed to possess cannabis unless they have a medical marijuana card, which is why I keep going back to all Black folks, all brown folks. If you got a medical marijuana program in your state, get the card. You're protected by HIPAA. You're supposed to be. And there's these moments where you're in the in-between of 18 to 21, where you are using cannabis responsibly, but the law says that you're not allowed to, and you can be protected by simply having the medical card. I want to just quickly just go back to what I was saying real fast. It's not that I don't think that we know the brain continues to develop until age 25. We do know that. However, I think when we do not question scientific studies that are starting with bias, we do ourselves a disservice. At one point, really biased scientific studies used to believe that Blacks had less intelligence and that Blacks, we felt no pain. That's the type of research that used to be done in this country and deemed scientific research. And you get to find what you go looking for, right? So if you believe there's no pain, you'll find it. If you believe we have no intelligence, you'll find it. Well, guess what? For 40 to 80 years, we believe that THC is extremely harmful. It has been demonized to the upteens level. And so, of course, if you do a research on juvenile use of THC, you are going to find that there may be a correlation between impairment. I question those studies. I question those studies also because they're old, and because I work with so many parents who literally for years now are dependent on cannabinoid medicine for their children, and there is no impairment. I work with too many wicked smart people that have been using cannabis since they was like 10, and they literally can run circles around people in physics and in math. I'm not convinced. I'm sorry. I believe it's medicine first and foremost. I think we need to learn how to wield it as a medicine or a medicinal option, but I'm not convinced that we have to be fully developed in our brain. I'm actually more convinced that maybe if we had it in our diet, our brains would develop in a better way, in a balanced way. And some of the things that our children are suffering from that lead to suicide would no longer be in place. But again, that's me. I'm postulating, and it's just, I really don't know, but I definitely have to question anything that starts with that much bias for research.
Okay, well, you always drop in the jewels and facts, and we do go down the rabbit hole real quick, because ultimately, yes, we know that there are a lot of studies that was wrong. We know that they were biased, and so we do need to look, and now you're giving people ideas where they should start from on the type of studies we want to see in today's age, because we're a lot smarter, we have a lot more technology at our hip, and we have access to this information. Now let's just bring the bar to a place where everybody can play, everybody could use their scientific skills to do that. Because in order to even get into FDA clinical type of research on that level in America, you would have to, cut off your arms, your legs, and give a kidney. So this has been a great episode. Please, 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 people, as Dasheeda would say, get your civic life on and go vote. Go vote, go vote. And if you are voting in a state that has cannabis on the ballot, please click those links, get your research together so you can understand what you're voting on, because you can also vote again in 4 years too. To make sure that it looks a little bit better, more to your standard. It also gives you a little bit longer time to get the licenses in place, the commission. So you don't have to rush and vote yes, but if you don't vote at all, you might not get any legalization. So it's a double-edged sword. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed our episode of She Blaze.
Hey, it's always good to see you, Ice. I wish we were seeing each other a little bit more, but we know with COVID it's just difficult. But this has been a great episode. I just love that we're informing folks. We want people to get to the ballot and understand what's actually happening. That's the opposite, I feel like, of the established leaders. Not all of them, but it is one of the things that I want us to continue to focus on. So I'm super excited about your deep dive into election 2020, and that will continue for future episodes. So you definitely want to follow us in order to make sure that you are learning what's happening right to the minute as it pertains to the cannabis industry.
Absolutely. And let the people know where they could find you, D.
Of course, you can find me at Dasheeda Dawson on Instagram and on Twitter, and on Facebook right here where we are live at The WeedHead or / The WeedHead. I am The WeedHead. You can find me on theweedhead.com always with myself and my company.
I know that's right. Well, make sure you are following along to She Blaze on Facebook, Instagram, and listen to us anytime on iHeartRadio, Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. We everywhere. So go and check us out and make sure you subscribe to WeedHead.com. Bye.
Bye. Have a great week, Ice.
You too.